Lieutenant Aria Bennett arrived at the military hospital with a single duffel bag and a carefully guarded secret. The Marine saw a quiet young nurse, too calm and unremarkable to take seriously. Senior staff questioned whether she could handle the pressure of a combat zone. But none of them knew that beneath her nursing uniform lay the skills of an elite warrior. And when armed men stormed through the hospital doors, the woman everyone had dismissed would become the only thing standing between chaos and survival. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The desert heat shimmered across the tarmac as Lieutenant Aria Bennett stepped off the transport plane, her duffel bag slung over one shoulder. The military hospital rose before her like a fortress of concrete and bulletproof glass, surrounded by sand-filled barriers and razor wire. This wasn't her first deployment, but it was her first time arriving as just a nurse. She adjusted her uniform and walked toward the main entrance, her boots crunching against gravel. Inside the hospital, fluorescent lights hummed overhead, the smell of antiseptic mixed with dust that no amount of cleaning could eliminate. Marines in various states of recovery lined the hallways, some on crutches, others in wheelchairs. A few glanced at Aria as she passed, their eyes showing mild curiosity before dismissing her entirely. "You must be the new transfer." A stocky man in scrubs approached, his name tag reading Patterson, senior medic. He looked her up and down with barely concealed skepticism. "Lieutenant Bennett, right?" "That's correct," Aria replied evenly. Patterson crossed his arms. "You look pretty young. How long have you been nursing?" "Long enough." Aria's voice remained neutral, but her dark eyes held steady contact. "Right." Patterson didn't sound convinced. "Well, this isn't some stateside clinic. We get trauma cases here that would make veteran nurses quit. Think you can handle it?" "I'll manage." Patterson snorted softly. "We'll see. Come on, I'll show you around." As they walked through the corridors, Aria absorbed every detail. She noted the locations of exits, the positioning of security checkpoints, and the sight lines from different angles. Her observation skills went beyond typical orientation awareness, but she kept her expression pleasant and unremarkable. "Trauma bay is through here," Patterson gestured. "Emergency supplies in that closet. Crash cart always stays charged. We run drills monthly, but when real casualties come in, it's chaos. You follow orders. You stay out of the way until you know what you're doing, understood?" "Understood," Aria said quietly. In the break room, several nurses looked up from their coffee. A tall woman with sharp features and blonde hair, pulled back in a tight bun, stood immediately. Her name tag identified her as Sandra Whitmore, lead nurse. "So you're the replacement," Sandra said, her tone assessing. "We've been short-staffed for 3 weeks. Hope you're ready to work." "I am." Sandra's eyes narrowed slightly. "You seem awful calm for someone who just arrived in a combat zone." Aria offered a small smile. "I don't panic easily." "Good, because we don't have time for hand-holding." Sandra turned back to her coffee, effectively ending the conversation. The other nurses introduced themselves with varying degrees of warmth. Aria noticed hierarchies, alliances, and tensions within seconds. She'd learned long ago that social dynamics mattered as much as technical skills in high-pressure environments. Her first shift began that evening. The trauma bay bustled with routine activity until the radio crackled with an incoming emergency. A convoy had hit an improvised explosive device 5 miles out. Multiple casualties, including severe blast injuries. "Bennett," Patterson shouted. "You're with me. Let's see what you've got." The ambulance doors burst open, and Marines rushed in carrying a stretcher. The wounded soldier was barely conscious, his uniform torn and bloodied. Shrapnel wounds covered his left side, and his breathing came in shallow gasps. "Sucking chest wound," Patterson announced. "Probable pneumothorax. We need to seal it and get a chest tube in now." Aria moved without hesitation. Her hands worked with practiced precision, cutting away the damaged uniform and exposing the injury. She sealed the wound with practiced efficiency while calling out vitals in a steady voice. "BP drooping. 80/50. Heart rate 130 and climbing. A doctor rushed over, barking orders. Arya anticipated each one, already reaching for the necessary equipment before he finished speaking. She inserted in 4-line on her first attempt, drew blood samples, and prepped the chest tube kit simultaneously. Good instincts, the doctor muttered, surprised. But while Arya's medical skills impressed, something else caught Patterson's attention. Her eyes kept scanning the room, tracking every person's position, noting the locations of doors and windows. When an orderly dropped a metal tray with a loud crash, most staff jumped. Arya simply glanced toward the sound, assessed it as non-threatening, and returned to her patient without missing a beat. "You're awfully calm for your first trauma case here," Patterson said later, after they'd stabilized the Marine. "I've seen worse." The words slipped out before Arya could soften them. Patterson's eyebrows rose. "Where exactly did you serve before this?" "Around," Arya said vaguely. "Different places." She walked away before he could press further, leaving Patterson staring after her with growing curiosity. Over the next few days, Arya settled into the hospital's rhythm. She took the difficult shifts without complaint, handled the worst injuries with steady hands, and never asked for help. But small things kept emerging that didn't quite fit the profile of an ordinary nurse. During a supply inventory, she instinctively used military terminology that made a nearby Marine corporal do a double-take. "Stack those supply crates in a defensive perimeter, not against the wall," she told an orderly. "Better sight lines and access if we need them quickly." The corporal laughed. "You talk like you've been in the field, Lieutenant. Most nurses say things like put them neatly or whatever." Arya caught herself. "Just makes sense for efficiency. If you say so." But the corporal's expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. In the recovery ward, Arya met Private Tyler Matthews, a 19-year-old Marine who'd lost 2 friends in the same explosion that injured him. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his leg in traction, his eyes hollow. "How's the pain?" Arya asked, checking his chart. "Fine, dramatized. That's not what your vitals say. Your heart rate's elevated and you're barely sleeping." Tyler finally looked at her. "What's it matter? Pain's just pain." Arya pulled up a chair, her movements deliberate and calm. "Pain matters because ignoring it won't make you stronger. It'll just make you less effective when you need to be sharp." Something in her tone made Tyler actually focus on her. "You sound like my drill instructor. Pain and fear are information," Arya continued. "They tell you what needs attention. In the field, a Marine who ignores leg pain might re-injure himself and endanger his squad. Same principle here. You deal with it properly so you can heal and move forward." Tyler blinked. "Most nurses just say it'll get better or some sympathy stuff. Will sympathy help you walk again?" A ghost of a smile crossed Tyler's face. "No, ma'am." "Then let's focus on what will." Arya adjusted his pain medication and made notes on his chart. "You're scheduled for physical therapy tomorrow. It's going to hurt worse before it gets better. But you're a Marine. You already know how to push through things that hurt." For the first time since his injury, Tyler nodded with something resembling determination. Their conversation didn't go unnoticed. Sandra Whitmore stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching with calculating eyes. When Arya left Tyler's room, Sandra intercepted her. "You're very comfortable giving pep talks to combat soldiers," Sandra observed. "I'm comfortable talking to patients," Arya corrected mildly. "Most nurses build rapport differently. You sound like you've been through combat yourself." Arya met her gaze steadily. "I know how to motivate people in difficult circumstances. It's part of good nursing." Sandra's lips pressed into a thin line. "Just remember you're new here. Don't overstep." "I won't." But Sandra wasn't satisfied. Over the following days, she began asking pointed questions around the staff room. Where had Arya trained? Why had she transferred? What exactly was her background? The questions created a subtle undercurrent of suspicion that Arya felt but chose to ignore. One evening, as Arya left the hospital after a double shift, she noticed something that made her pause. 2 civilian vehicles were parked near the perimeter fence in an area typically restricted to military transport. The men inside appeared to be contractors, but something about their positioning felt wrong. They had clear sight lines to multiple hospital entrances. Arya memorized the vehicle descriptions and license plates before heading to the security office. The duty officer, a young corporal named Davis, barely looked up from his computer. "Can I help you, Lieutenant?" "There are two vehicles parked near the east perimeter. They've been there for over an hour, and the occupants appear to be observing the facility." Davis pulled up security camera feeds. "Oh, those guys? Yeah, they're contractors. Probably waiting for someone. We get contract workers all the time for maintenance and supplies." "Have you verified their credentials?" "They're outside the perimeter. Not really our jurisdiction unless they try to enter." Adia frowned. Their positioning gives them clear observation of entry and exit patterns. Davis finally looked at her with mild annoyance. "With respect, Lieutenant, you're a nurse. Security's not really your department. We've got protocols for this stuff." "I understand. Just wanted to report what I observed." "Noted." Davis returned to his computer, clearly dismissing her concern. Arya left the office but made her own notes about the vehicles, including the time and the specific positions they'd occupied. Old habits were hard to break. The following week brought a surprise hospital-wide lockdown drill. Alarms blared at 2 in the morning, and staff scrambled to their designated positions. Arya was in the recovery ward when the drill began, while other nurses herded patients toward designated safe zones with varying degrees of organization. Arya moved differently. She positioned mobile patients near interior walls away from windows. She directed staff to create clear lanes for evacuation while maintaining cover. Her instructions came in calm, clipped phrases that sounded more like tactical commands than nursing guidance. "Keep patients below window level. Don't bunch up near doorways. You two, establish a count at each checkpoint. Report discrepancies immediately." Patterson, coordinating from the trauma bay, noticed through the security feed. He watched Arya organize her section with military precision, her movements efficient and purposeful. She cleared sight lines, established fallback positions, and maintained constant awareness of everyone's location. When the drill ended and staff gathered for debriefing, the hospital commander commended Arya's section for the fastest and most organized evacuation. "Lieutenant Bennett's area was textbook perfect," he announced. "Whatever training you had, the rest of the staff should take notes." Sandra's expression soured noticeably. Later, in a locker room, Sandra confronted Arya directly. "That was quite a performance during the drill." "I was just following protocols," Arya said, changing out her scrubs. "No, you were doing something else. You moved like military police or security forces, not a nurse." Arya closed her locker calmly. "I took the training seriously. Isn't that what we're supposed to do?" "Where did you serve before this assignment?" "That's in my file." "Your file is surprisingly vague." Sandra stepped closer. "I checked. It lists your nursing credentials and deployment history, but there are gaps. Months unaccounted for." Arya's expression remained neutral. "Personnel records aren't your concern, Sandra. When someone on my staff might be hiding something, it becomes my concern. I'm not hiding anything relevant to my work here." Arya picked up her bag. "If you have official questions about my record, take them to command. Otherwise, I have another shift in 6 hours." She walked out, leaving Sandra frustrated and more suspicious than ever. That night, alone in her quarters, Arya sat on her bunk and rolled up her sleeve. On her inner forearm, partially hidden by her watch band, was a small tattoo, an eagle, anchor, and trident. The Navy SEAL trident. She traced it absently, lost in memories she tried hard to leave behind. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Heard you're at Forward Station 7. Stay sharp. Not everyone there is who they seem." Arya deleted the message immediately and powered down her phone. She lay back on her bunk, staring at the ceiling. The transition to a normal nursing life was supposed to be simple. Just medicine, just helping people heal. No more missions, no more combat, no more carrying secrets that could get people killed. But instincts developed over years of special operations didn't just disappear. She noticed things others missed. She prepared for threats others couldn't imagine. And increasingly, those instincts were telling her that something at this hospital wasn't right. The following morning, Rumors spread through the hospital like wildfire. Intelligence reports suggested that insurgent groups were considering attacks on military medical facilities. The goal was psychological impact, striking at places traditionally considered safe zones. In the staff briefing room, the hospital commander addressed the assembled nurses, doctors, and Marines. We've received updated threat assessments. While there's no specific credible threat to this facility, Command wants us aware and vigilant. Security protocols remain unchanged, but report anything suspicious immediately. Arya listened carefully, noting the careful phrasing. No specific credible threat didn't mean no threat at all. It meant intelligence was fragmentary, unconfirmed, or too vague to act upon definitively. After the briefing, conversations buzzed with nervous energy. Some staff dismissed the warnings as routine. Others grew visibly anxious. Arya returned to her quarters and quietly began her own preparations. She reviewed emergency evacuation routes, memorizing alternate paths and potential choke points. She studied the hospital's layout with tactical eyes, identifying defensible positions and vulnerability points. She noted where medical supplies were stored, where communication equipment was located, and which staff members seemed most capable under pressure. None of this was official. None of it was expected of a nurse. But Arya couldn't turn off years of training that had kept her alive in far more dangerous situations. In the recovery ward, Tyler was making progress with physical therapy. Arya found him attempting to walk with crutches, his face contorted with effort and pain. "Keep your weight centered," she instructed. "Don't compensate with your upper body. Let your good leg do the work while the injured one learns to trust itself again." Tyler gritted his teeth and adjusted his stance. This is harder than any training exercise, because training exercises end. Healing doesn't, not until you're actually healed. Arya walked beside him, ready to catch him if he fell. Pain is temporary. Giving up is permanent. "Damn, Lieutenant." Tyler managed a strained laugh. "You really don't do the soft approach, do you? Would soft help you walk? Probably not. Then why waste time on it?" Arya's expression softened slightly. "You're doing well, Tyler. Better than most patients at this stage." The encouragement, rare from her, made Tyler stand a little straighter despite the pain. Their session was interrupted when an orderly rushed in. "Lieutenant Bennett, we've got a situation in receiving. They need all available nurses." Arya helped Tyler back to his bed and headed to the receiving area. A supply truck had arrived, but the accompanying paperwork didn't match the delivery manifest. Several crates were unaccounted for, and others listed weren't present. The logistics officer, a harried-looking captain named Morrison, was arguing with the civilian driver. "This is the third time this month deliveries haven't matched the orders. What's going on with your dispatch?" The driver shrugged. "I just drive what they load, sir. You got a problem? Take it up with the depot." Arya examined the paperwork while nurses and orderlies began unloading. Something about the discrepancies bothered her. They weren't random errors. Specific items were missing: portable medical equipment, battery packs, high-value pharmaceuticals. The kind of supplies that could be resold or repurposed. "Captain Morrison," Arya said quietly, "these discrepancies follow a pattern. It's not random mistakes." Morrison looked at her irritably. "And you are?" "Lieutenant Bennett, nursing staff." "Sir, the missing items are all high-value, portable, and useful outside medical contexts. This could be systematic theft at the supply chain level." "That's a serious accusation. I'm not accusing anyone here. I'm suggesting the pattern warrants investigation." Morrison studied the paperwork again, his expression shifting from annoyance to concern. "You're right. I'll report this up the chain." "Good catch, Lieutenant." But as Arya walked away, she noticed the civilian driver watching her with an expression that was hard to read. Not quite hostile, but definitely noting her attention to detail. Over the next few days, social dynamics in the hospital continued shifting. Some Marines who'd initially dismissed Arya began seeking her out for conversation. She had a directness they appreciated, an absence of the tiptoeing that sometimes characterized nurse-patient interactions. One evening, a lance corporal named Jackson approached her in the mess hall. "Lieutenant, mind if I ask you something?" "Go ahead." Some of the guys are saying you seem different from most nurses, like you've seen action or something. Jackson's tone was curious, not accusatory. Is that true? Arya considered her response carefully. I've been in difficult situations. It changes how you see things. Combat situation. Situations where people's lives depended on making the right decisions quickly. Jackson nodded slowly. Yeah, that tracks. You got that look sometimes. Like you're always thinking 3 steps ahead. Habit, Arya said simply. But Jackson's observation was echoed by others. Dr. Chun, one of the senior physicians, pulled Arya aside after a particularly complex surgery. Your situational awareness is remarkable, he said. During the procedure, you tracked every person in that operating room, anticipated instrument needs before I asked, and maintained awareness of time and resources like you were running a tactical operation. I was concentrating, Arya replied. It was more than that. Dr. Chin's eyes were thoughtful. You have training beyond nursing, don't you? I have a training necessary to do my job well. Dr. Chun smiled slightly. That's not an answer, Lieutenant. It's the one I'm giving. He didn't press, but Arya knew the questions wouldn't stop. People were starting to notice what she'd try to keep hidden. That night, Arya was making rounds in the intensive care unit when she noticed something that made her pause. One of the security cameras in the hallway was angled differently than before. Subtle, but noticeable to someone trained to observe such details. She continued her rounds normally, but mentally mapped every camera position she could recall. 2 others had been adjusted as well, creating new blind spots in coverage. After a shift, Arya found Corporal Davis in the security office. Have there been any maintenance calls for the security cameras recently? Davis pulled up logs. Yeah, actually, a couple days ago. One of the contract maintenance guys said some cameras needed recalibration. Did you verify his credentials? He had the right badges and paperwork. Davis frowned. Why? Is something wrong? The adjustments created blind spots in coverage patterns. Davis pulled up current camera feeds and compared them to earlier recordings. His expression shifted to concern. You're right. That's not recalibration. That's deliberate repositioning. How did you even notice that? I pay attention. Arya kept her voice neutral. You should report this. I will. And Lieutenant. Davis looked at her with new respect. Thanks. Most people wouldn't have caught that. Arya left before the conversation could turn to questions about why she'd noticed such details in the first place. The following evening, a more serious incident occurred. Around midnight, a man in contractor coveralls attempted to access a restricted corridor that led to secure patient wards. A Marine guard stopped him, but the man's explanation was vague and contradictory. Arya was nearby, restocking supplies, when she overheard the confrontation. The contractor claimed he needed to check electrical panels, but when asked to show his work order, he fumbled with papers that looked hastily assembled. She approached casually. Electrical panels in that corridor were serviced last week. I was there when they tested the backup generators. The contractor's eyes flicked to her, then away. Must be a different panel. There's only one electrical junction in that section, Arya said calmly, and it's documented as operational. If you're looking for something else, maybe I can help you find it. The Marine guard, sensing something off, called for backup. The contractor suddenly decided he had the wrong building and left quickly. Good instincts, Lieutenant, the guard said after the man disappeared. That guy was definitely lying. His badge lanyard was new, but his coveralls were worn, Arya observed. Usually it's the opposite for contractors, and he didn't have the right tools for electrical work. The guard radioed security, who found no record of any scheduled contractor work in that area that night. Later, in her quarters, Arya received a phone call from an unlisted number. She answered cautiously. This is Bennett. A familiar voice responded, one she hadn't heard in over a year. Arya, it's Marcus. Arya's grip on the phone tightened. Marcus had been her team leader during her last deployment with Naval Special Warfare. How did you get this number? Same way I always find people. Listen, I heard you transferred to Forward Station 7. That's not a safe posting right now. Everywhere's unsafe. That's why it's a deployment. This is different. Marcus's tone was serious. There's chatter about potential operations targeting medical facilities in your sector. The kind of chatter that usually means something's being planned. Official intel? Fragments. Nothing solid enough to act on officially, but enough to make me worried about someone I care about. Aria's jaw tightened. I left that life, Marcus. I'm just a nurse now. You're never just anything, Aria. And if something goes down at that hospital, your skills might be the difference between casualties and a massacre. He paused. Just stay alert. Trust your instincts. They've kept you alive this long. Is that official advice or personal concern? Both. Watch your six, Bennett. The call ended, leaving Aria staring at her phone. She wanted to dismiss it as overcaution, but Marcus had earned his paranoia through years of operations. He didn't make calls like this without reason. That week, Aria made it her quiet mission to train junior nurses on crisis procedures without making it obvious. During routine supply restocking, she showed them optimal placement for emergency access. During patient transfers, she demonstrated the fastest evacuation routes. She framed everything as efficiency improvements, never mentioning security concerns. One of the younger nurses, Emily Parker, caught on quickly. You're really thorough about this stuff, Lieutenant. Better to know procedures before you need them in a rush, Aria replied. Emily nodded thoughtfully. You know, some of the staff think you're weird about security stuff, but I think you're just prepared. My dad's a firefighter. He's the same way, always thinking about exits and hazards. Smart man. He says people who've seen bad things tend to prepare for them happening again. Aria glanced at Emily. The young nurse was watching her with understanding rather than suspicion. Your dad's right. So you have seen bad things. Yes. Emily didn't press for details, just nodded and continued organizing supplies with the positioning Aria had recommended. But not everyone was as accepting. Sandra Whitmore's suspicion had evolved into active investigation. She'd contacted personnel offices, trying to access Aria's complete service record. Most of it remained classified, which only deepened Sandra's conviction that Aria was hiding something significant. I'm telling you, something's off about her, Sandra told Dr. Chun in the break room, not caring that her voice carried. Nurses don't move like that, don't think like that. She's had combat training, probably extensive, and she won't admit it. Dr. Chun sipped his coffee calmly. Does it matter? She's an excellent nurse. Her patient outcomes are among the best in the facility. It matters because I don't like being lied to. Has she actually lied? Or just declined to share personal information that's none of our business? Sandra's eyes narrowed. Whose side are you on? I'm not on sides. I'm focused on patient care, which Bennett excels at. Her personal history is her own unless it affects her work, which it doesn't. But Sandra remained unconvinced and increasingly hostile. Meanwhile, subtle signs of surveillance continued accumulating. Tyler, during his physical therapy sessions, mentioned seeing the same unfamiliar faces around the hospital perimeter multiple times. Perimeter patrols reported occasional bursts of unusual radio chatter on frequencies not assigned to base operations. Security sweeps found nothing concrete, but the cumulative effect created an atmosphere of low-grade tension. Aria documented everything she observed, though she wasn't sure what to do with the information. Officially, she was just a nurse. She had no authority to investigate security concerns beyond reporting them through proper channels, which she'd done. But her instincts, honed through years of operating in hostile environments, were screaming that something was building. One night, after a particularly long shift, Aria visited the recovery ward to check on patients who struggled with sleep. Tyler was awake, staring out the window into darkness. Can't sleep? Aria asked quietly. Keep having dreams about the ambush, Tyler admitted. I see Rodriguez and Chun getting hit again and again. Can't make it stop. Aria pulled up a chair. The dreams will fade with time, but they don't go away completely. You learn to live with them. You sound like you know. Ido. Tyler looked at her directly. You've lost people. Yes. In combat. Aria hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yes. I knew it. Tyler's voice held no accusation, just recognition. You've been there. That's why you talk to us the way you do. Not like we're broken, like we're still soldiers. You are still soldiers. Being injured doesn't change that. They sat in silence for a moment before Tyler spoke again. Some of the guys think you might have been special forces or something. Were you? Arya stood, ending the conversation gently. I was someone who learned to survive difficult situations. That's all that matters now. Get some rest, Tyler. Morning PT is going to be rough. She left before he could ask more questions, but Tyler watched her go with new understanding in his eyes. The next evening, as Arya was leaving the hospital, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She almost deleted it unread, but something made her open it. Stay alert. They're closer than you think. No signature, no context, just a warning. Arya scanned the parking area, her training taking over. She identified every vehicle, every person, every potential threat or observation point. Nothing seemed immediately wrong, but the message confirmed what her instincts had been telling her for weeks. Something was coming. She deleted the message and walked to her quarters, hyper-aware of her surroundings. Inside, she secured the door and sat on her bunk, weighing her options. She could report the message to security, but without more context, it would seem paranoid. She could request a transfer, but that felt like running from shadows. Or she could stay alert, trust her training, and be ready for whatever was building in the darkness. Arya chose the third option. She began subtle preparations, nothing that would draw attention, but enough to ensure she wasn't caught completely unprepared if the situation escalated. She memorized staff schedules, noting who could be counted on in a crisis and who might panic. She identified critical patients who would need priority protection. She mapped every possible defensive position in the hospital. All of it done quietly, in moments between shifts and during breaks, invisible to everyone around her. But shadows were indeed gathering, just beyond the perimeter of light and safety. And soon, those shadows would break through in ways that would force Arya to reveal everything she tried to leave behind. The tension from the previous weeks seemed to settle into an uneasy quiet as morning light filtered through the hospital windows. Arya arrived for her shift just after dawn, but something felt immediately wrong. The atmosphere carried a weight she recognized from past operations, that electric sense of danger lurking just beneath the surface of normalcy. She moved through the corridors with heightened awareness. Small details stood out like warning flares. The security rotation had changed without announcement. A side entrance that was normally locked stood slightly ajar, the magnetic seal not fully engaged. Two orderlies she didn't recognize were pushing supply carts through areas they shouldn't have access to. Arya approached the nurse's station where Emily Parker was reviewing patient charts. "Emily, do you recognize those two orderlies near the East Wing?" Emily glanced up. "Which ones?" "They just passed. Older guy with a beard, younger one with a limp." "No, I don't think so. But we get temp staff sometimes when we're shorthanded." Emily returned to her charts, unconcerned. Arya made a mental note to check with personnel, but didn't push the issue. Paranoia was only useful if it didn't make you seem unstable to those around you. The morning routine continued normally until the radio crackled with an emergency call. A convoy had been hit by a coordinated ambush 10 miles from base. Multiple vehicles destroyed, casualties estimated at 15 to 20 wounded, severity unknown. The hospital erupted into controlled chaos. Trauma teams assembled, operating rooms were prepped, and nurses rushed to prepare receiving areas. Arya moved through the preparations with practiced efficiency, but part of her mind remained focused on the timing. An attack this close to the base, this coordinated, suggested significant planning and intelligence gathering. The first ambulances arrived within 20 minutes. Doors burst open, and Marines carried stretchers bearing bloodied soldiers. Blast injuries, shrapnel wounds, severe burns. The trauma bay filled rapidly with the organized chaos of combat medicine. Arya worked alongside Dr. Chun on a soldier with severe abdominal trauma. Her hands moved with surgical precision, clamping bleeders, managing fluids, calling out vitals in a steady rhythm that cut through the surrounding noise. BP's dropping 70/40. "We're losing him. Hang another unit of blood." "Push the fluids," Dr. Chun ordered. Arya was already moving, her actions anticipating needs before they were vocalized. But even as she worked, she maintained awareness of the larger situation. More ambulances arriving. More wounded than expected. The hospital's capacity being pushed to its limits. That's when vulnerability spiked. When every staff member was focused inward on saving lives, external security became secondary. It was exactly the situation someone would create if they wanted to exploit a facility's weaknesses. Aria's instincts screamed warnings, but she couldn't abandon her patient. Then she heard it. Gunfire. Not distant, not outside the perimeter. Close. Inside the compound. Several nurses froze, confusion on their faces. The sound came again, sharper, followed by shouting. What was that? Emily's voice carried panic. Before anyone could answer, the main entrance to the trauma bay exploded inward. 3 men in contractor coveralls burst through, weapons raised. Not insurgents in obvious combat gear. These were dressed to blend in, to move through the facility without immediate alarm. Everyone down. Now, the lead attacker's voice cut through the room with brutal authority. Staff members dropped behind gurneys and equipment. A nurse screamed. One of the Marines being treated tried to rise despite his injuries and was shoved back down violently. The attackers moved with professional efficiency, covering angles, controlling the space. This wasn't random violence. This was a planned operation. Aria's body responded on pure instinct, dropping into a defensive crouch behind a medical cart. Her mind shifted into combat mode, assessing threats, counting hostiles, identifying weapons and tactics. 3 in the trauma bay, but she'd heard more gunfire from other sections. This was a coordinated breach. Dr. Chun raised his hand slowly. We're medical personnel. These are wounded soldiers. Whatever you want. Shut up. The lead attacker scanned the room. Nobody moves. Nobody dies unnecessarily. Patterson, the senior medic, stood frozen near the supply closet. Sandra Whitmore had gone pale, pressed against the far wall. Other staff members huddled behind equipment, terrified. The attackers began moving through the space systematically, checking identification of wounded Marines, clearly searching for someone specific. Aria's tactical mind raced through options. She was unarmed, surrounded by civilians and wounded soldiers who couldn't defend themselves. Direct confrontation would get people killed. But doing nothing meant allowing hostile forces complete control of a military medical facility. She caught Tyler's eye across the room. He was in the recovery section, his injured leg still in a brace, but his expression showed the same combat awareness Aria felt. He gave her an almost imperceptible nod, recognizing that she was different from the panicking staff around them. One of the attackers grabbed Emily, pulling her roughly away from a patient. You, open the medication storage. Now, Emily stumbled, terrified. I don't have the codes. The attacker backhanded her across the face. Emily fell, blood streaming from her split lip. Aria's body tensed, every instinct screaming to intervene. But she forced herself to remain still, to think tactically rather than emotionally. Revealing her capabilities too soon could make the situation worse. Someone open it or she gets worse than a slap, the attacker threatened. Dr. Chun stepped forward. I have access. I'll open it. Just don't hurt anyone else. As Dr. Chun moved toward the medication storage, Aria shifted her position slightly, putting herself between the nearest attacker and a group of wounded Marines. The movement was subtle, almost invisible, but it positioned her to intercept if violence escalated. More gunfire echoed from the corridors. Screams, shouting. The attack was spreading through the hospital like a poison. Then the lights flickered and died. Emergency backup systems kicked in after a few seconds, bathing everything in dim red emergency lighting. The attackers had cut primary power. In the confusion of the darkness, Aria moved. Not attacking yet, but repositioning. She shifted patients, moving the most vulnerable behind better cover. She grabbed medical equipment that could serve dual purposes. She created lanes of movement while appearing to simply huddle in fear like everyone else. When the emergency lights stabilized, she transformed the trauma bay's layout without anyone noticing. Sight lines were blocked. Cover was improved. If fighting erupted, casualties would be minimized. Patterson noticed what she'd done. He stared at her with dawning realization, seeing past the nurse's uniform to the trained operator beneath. The lead attacker's radio crackled. Section 2 secure. Section 4 encountering resistance. Section 1 status. Trauma bay secured. Multiple targets present. Proceeding with search. Search. They were looking for someone specific among the wounded. Aria's mind worked through the implications. The convoy attack wasn't random. It was designed to bring specific wounded to this hospital, where attackers were already positioned to infiltrate. This was a targeted operation, probably after intelligence or personnel. She needed to organize a defense, to coordinate resistance. But doing so would reveal everything she'd try to hide. Her quiet nursing life would end the moment she stepped forward. A wounded Marine near her groaned in pain. An attacker turned, weapon rising. Shut him up, or I will. The choice crystallized in that moment. She could maintain her cover and watch people die. Or she could act and accept the consequences. Aria stud slowly, ens visible, posture non threatening. Let me give him something for the pain. He's not a threat to you. The attacker's eyes narrowed. Get back down. If he keeps making noise, he'll draw attention you don't want, Aria said calmly. Let me sedate him. 30 seconds. Then he's quiet, and you can focus on whatever you're actually here for. The logic worked. The attacker gestured with his weapon. Do it. Fast. Aria moved to the medical cart, selecting a sedative. As she prepared the injection, her mind mapped the room. 3 hostiles, 2 with rifles, 1 with a handgun. Staff scattered, mostly behind cover. Wounded Marines, some mobile, most not. Tyler watching her, ready to follow her lead despite his injury. She administered the sedative to the groaning Marine, her movements calm and professional. But as she worked, she spoke quietly in a voice only Tyler could hear. When starts, get everyone down and stay down. Understand. Tyler's eyes widened slightly, but he nodded once. Aria straightened, returning to her position. But now she wasn't a terrified nurse. She was a coiled spring, waiting for the right moment. That moment came minutes later when more attackers entered the trauma bay, dragging a wounded officer on a stretcher. The man was unconscious, severely injured from the convoy attack. But Aria recognized him from intelligence briefings. Captain Richards, an officer who'd been working on classified operational planning. This is the one, the lead attacker confirmed into his radio. Prepare for extraction. They were going to take him. And once they did, everyone else in the hospital became a liability to eliminate. Aria saw the calculation in the lead attacker's eyes. The mission was almost complete. Witnesses were a problem. The violence would escalate from control to elimination in seconds. She had to act now. The next moments would define everything. Aria's decision was made, consequences accepted. She couldn't save everyone by remaining hidden. The lead attacker gestured to his team. Secure the exits. Once we move the package, cleanup begins. Cleanup. Execution. Aria moved before conscious thought could interfere. Her hand swept across the medical cart, sending instruments clattering to the floor. The noise was sudden, disorienting. Every attacker's eyes turned toward the sound. In that split second of distraction, Aria launched herself at the nearest attacker. Her body moved with explosive precision honed through years of close-quarters combat training. She closed the distance in 2 strides, her hand striking his weapon arm with devastating accuracy. The rifle clattered away as her other hand drove into his throat, crushing his windpipe. He dropped, gasping. The other attackers reacted, but Aria was already moving. She rolled behind a gurney as gunfire erupted, bullets punching through equipment. Staff screamed. Tyler was shouting for people to get down. Aria came up behind another attacker, who turned to track her. Her arm wrapped around his neck in a perfect rear naked choke. He tried to throw her off, but her positioning was flawless. Within seconds, his struggles weakened. She lowered his unconscious body and grabbed his weapon in one fluid motion. The lead attacker opened fire, forcing Aria behind cover. But she wasn't fighting alone anymore. Tyler, despite his injured leg, had grabbed a metal tray and hurled it at the gunman, disrupting his aim. Other Marines who could move were scrambling for cover, finding whatever weapons they could improvise. "Get the patients out," Arya shouted, her voice carrying command authority that made people move without thinking. "Emily, organize evacuation through the East Corridor. Dr. Chun, take anyone who can walk. Go now." Staff members who'd been frozen in terror suddenly had direction. Emily grabbed a wounded Marine, helping him toward the exit. Dr. Chun coordinated others, creating a flow of evacuation. But the lead attacker wasn't alone. More armed men poured into the trauma bay, responding to the gunfire. Arya assessed the situation with combat-trained clarity. 7 hostiles now, heavily armed. She had 1 rifle with maybe 20 rounds. Multiple unarmed civilians. Wounded soldiers who couldn't fight. No reinforcements. The odds were impossible. But impossible was something she'd faced before. She fired controlled bursts, not trying to kill, but to suppress and control movement. Each shot was precise, forcing attackers into cover, buying time for evacuation. Her positioning was perfect, using medical equipment as cover while maintaining sightlines. Patterson stared at her in shock. This wasn't a nurse fighting desperately. This was a trained operator executing tactical combat with professional efficiency. "Who the hell are you?" he breathed. Arya didn't answer. She was too focused on keeping everyone alive. Tyler had found a fallen attacker's weapon. He fired awkwardly from his position on the floor, his injured leg preventing him from standing. But his shots were accurate enough to help control the space. "Tyler, conserve ammunition," Arya called. "Short bursts, make them count." The Marines in the room, even wounded ones, recognized professional military command when they heard it. Several began coordinating, creating a defensive perimeter around the most vulnerable patients. But the attackers were regrouping. The lead gunman's voice cut through the chaos. "Tactical response. Suppress and flank." They weren't random insurgents. They moved with military precision, coordinating fire and movement. Arya recognized the problem immediately. She was good, probably better than any single one of them. But they had numbers, better positions, and more ammunition. This was a holding action at best. She needed to change the dynamics. "Patterson," she shouted. "Medical oxygen tanks." "Where?" Patterson pointed to a storage closet. "There, but..." Arya was already moving. She sprinted across open ground, bullets tracking her path, but missing by fractions. She reached the closet, grabbed 2 oxygen tanks, and rolled back to cover. "Everyone back. Now," she ordered. The Marines and staff pulled back as Arya opened the oxygen tank valves and kicked them toward the attackers' positions. Pure oxygen flooded that section of the trauma bay. Then she fired a single shot into the oxygen-saturated air near a sparking electrical junction. The explosion wasn't massive, but it was enough. Fire bloomed across the attackers' position, forcing them to scatter. Suppressive smoke filled the room, destroying sightlines. In the chaos, Arya grabbed Tyler and 2 other wounded Marines. "Move! East Corridor now." They stumbled through the smoke, following the path Dr. Chun had taken. Behind them, attackers shouted in confusion, trying to reorganize. Arya was the last through the door. She paused just long enough to barricade it with a medical cart before following the evacuees. The East Corridor was crowded with frightened staff and wounded soldiers. Dr. Chin had them moving, but progress was slow with injured and panicked people. "We need defensive positions," Arya said, her tactical mind already mapping the space. "Barricade these doors. Position anyone who can fight at these corners. Create fallback positions every 20 meters." A Marine sergeant who'd been wounded in the convoy attack looked at her with narrow eyes. "You're giving orders like you've done this before." "I have." "What's your rank?" "Your real rank." "Right now, I'm the person keeping you alive." "That enough?" Arya's tone left no room for argument. The sergeant studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "You heard her. Set up defensive positions. Move it." The Marines responded instantly to their sergeant's commands, which were really Arya's commands filtered through military hierarchy. Tyler limped over to Arya, his face pale from pain, but his eyes sharp. "You're not just a nurse, are you?" "No. Special forces?" Arya met his gaze. "Something like that." "Then what the hell are you doing in a nursing uniform?" "Long story." Not the time. Arya checked the rifle she'd taken. Half a magazine left. Not enough for sustained combat. Tyler, I need you to help coordinate the wounded. Get them to the most secure rooms. Anyone who can hold a weapon, bring them to me. Tyler nodded and moved off, shouting instructions despite the pain that marked every step. Sandra Whitmore appeared from the crowd, her earlier hostility replaced by shock. The way you moved, that was military combat training. Advanced combat training. Yes. Why didn't you tell anyone? Would it have changed anything before today? Arya's eyes scanned the corridor, watching for threats. Right now, focus on getting patients to safety. We can discuss my background later if we survive. Sandra's expression hardened, but she nodded and moved to help organize evacuation. The sound of approaching footsteps and shouted commands echoed through the corridors. The attackers were regrouping, searching floor by floor. Dottore, c'è approachtaria. Hospital security is trying to coordinate a response, but communications are disrupted. We're on our own for now. How many staff can fight? Maybe 10, including wounded Marines who can still hold weapons. Most are medical personnel with minimal combat training. Arya's mind calculated odds and options. We need to consolidate in a defensible position. Where's the most secure location in this hospital? The intensive care unit has reinforced doors and limited access points. It's designed to maintain sterile conditions during external emergencies. That's our fortress. Get everyone moving there now. Arya turned to the Marine sergeant. Sergeant, I need your people to provide cover during movement. Leapfrog advancement. Maintain rear security. The sergeant's eyes showed questions about who this nurse really was, but he followed orders. You heard her. Combat intervals. Watch your sectors. The evacuation became a tactical movement. Marines covered angles while medical staff helped wounded move between positions. Arya coordinated from the center, her voice calm and authoritative, directing traffic like she'd done 100 times before in hostile territory. Patterson moved alongside her, helping a wounded soldier. I knew something was different about you from day one. But this, he shook his head. You're not Navy Nurse Corps, are you? Not really. I am now. But before, Arya glanced at him. Before doesn't matter. What matters is getting through today. They reached the intensive care unit. The space was smaller, more defensible. Reinforced doors, limited windows, multiple rooms that could serve as fallback positions. Arya immediately began organizing defenses. Barricade the main doors. Position armed personnel at these angles. Create triage areas for wounded in the back rooms. Anyone with medical training, start treating critical patients. Emily appeared at her side, still bleeding from where she'd been hit earlier. Lieutenant, what do you need me to do? You're injured. Get treatment. I can still work. Tell me what you need. Arya saw the determination in the young nurse's eyes and nodded. Help coordinate patient care. Keep people calm. If shooting starts, everyone hits the floor immediately. Understood. As defenses came together, Tyler approached again. Lieutenant, we've got maybe 15 people who can shoot, but only 7 weapons. What's the plan? The plan is to hold this position until reinforcements arrive. And if they don't arrive in time, Arya's expression hardened. Then we make them pay for every inch. A Marine private with a head wound stepped forward. Ma'am, not to question orders, but who put you in charge? Your nurse. Before Arya could respond, the Marine sergeant intervened. Private, I've been in combat for 12 years. I know professional military leadership when I see it. This lieutenant moves like special operations, thinks like special operations, and fights like special operations. Until someone with higher rank and better ideas shows up, we follow her lead. Clear, Sergeant. The sergeant turned to Arya. But he's got a point. We're following you into a fight. Who are you really? The question hung in the air. Every person in that room was looking at her now, waiting for an answer. Arya took a breath. The secret she'd protected, the quiet life she'd tried to build, all of it was gone now. There was no going back. My name is Lieutenant Arya Bennett. Before transferring to Nurse Corps, I served with Naval Special Warfare Development Group. I completed 6 deployments in hostile theaters, conducting direct action operations. She paused, meeting their eyes. I left that life to help people heal instead of engaging in combat. But today, combat found us anyway. So yes, I know how to fight. And yes, I'll lead this defense if you'll follow. Silence fell across the room. Then the Marine sergeant stepped forward and offered his hand. Sergeant Mike Thompson, 3rd Marine Division. Honored to serve with you, Lieutenant. Arya shook his hand. Other Marines followed, offering respect and trust despite the chaos around them. Tyler grinned despite the pain in his leg. I knew you were more than just a nurse. I'm still a nurse, Tyler. Just one with a complicated resume. A shout from the barricade interrupted the moment. Movement in the corridor. They're coming. Arya moved to a defensive position, weapon ready. Everyone to positions. Fire only on my command. Conserve ammunition. Watch your backgrounds. No friendly fire. The intensive care unit became a fortress. Medical staff crouched behind cover. Marines took firing positions. Wounded soldiers prepared to fight from whatever position they could manage. And at the center of it all stood Arya, the quiet nurse nobody had taken seriously, now revealed as the trained warrior she'd always been. The attackers appeared at the far end of the corridor. Their leader's voice carried through the space. Surrender the officer, and we'll let everyone else live. Arya's response was steady and cold. You breached a military medical facility and attacked wounded soldiers. There's no negotiation. Leave now or face the consequences. The attacker laughed. You think you can stop us? We have superior numbers and firepower. You have numbers, Arya agreed. But you're fighting Marines now, and we don't surrender. A tense moment passed. Then the lead attacker raised his weapon. Your funeral. Gunfire erupted, and the battle for the hospital truly began. Gunfire echoed through the intensive care unit as bullets ricocheted off reinforced walls and medical equipment. Arya crouched behind a barricaded door, returning controlled fire that forced the attackers to take cover. Her movements were precise and economical, each shot calculated to suppress rather than waste ammunition. Conserve your rounds, she called to the Marines positioned at different angles. 3-round bursts maximum. Make them hesitate. Don't try for kills from this range. Sergeant Thompson fired from behind an overturned bed frame, his shots disciplined and measured. The other Marines followed Arya's lead, their training meshing seamlessly with her tactical direction. The initial assault lasted 3 minutes before the attackers pulled back, regrouping in the corridor beyond direct sight lines. The sudden silence was almost as unsettling as the gunfire had been. Sound off. Arya commanded. Any casualties? Section 1 clear, Thompson reported. Section 2, 1 minor graze. Nothing serious, another Marine called. Emily's voice came from the triage area. Medical staff all accounted for. Patients stable. Arya took stock of their situation. Ammunition was already running low. 7 weapons among 15 people who could fight, and several of those were wounded Marines operating on adrenaline and willpower rather than actual combat readiness. They'd survived the first probe, but the attackers would adjust tactics now. Dr. Chen moved to Arya's position, keeping low. That was extraordinary shooting. You didn't just suppress them, you controlled their movement patterns. It's what I was trained to do. Arya ejected her magazine, checking the remaining rounds. 12 left. Not enough for another sustained exchange. Naval Special Warfare Development Group, Dr. Chen said quietly. That's SEAL Team 6, isn't it? Tier 1 Special Operations. Arya glanced at him. Yes. Why nursing? Why hide that kind of capability? Because I saw enough combat for one lifetime. I wanted to save lives instead of taking them. She reloaded and scanned the corridor. Didn't work out as planned. Patterson crawled over, his expression a mixture of awe and confusion. Lieutenant, I need to know something. When you arrived here, was this some kind of undercover assignment? No, I transferred to Nurse Corps legitimately. I left Special Operations 18 months ago and retrained as a nurse. This deployment was supposed to be routine medical work. Arya's jaw tightened. Nobody planned for this. But you suspected something was wrong, Patterson pressed. All those security observations, the way you noticed things nobody else did. Old habits. You don't just turn off years of threat assessment training. Arya shifted position slightly, maintaining her view of potential approach angles. I noticed anomalies, but I had no specific intelligence about an attack. Sandra Whitmore appeared beside them, her earlier antagonism replaced by something closer to grudging respect. I owe you an apology. I thought you were hiding something dangerous. Turns out you were hiding something that might save all of us. Save your apologies until we're actually safe, Arya replied. Right now, we need to solve immediate problems. Sergeant Thompson. Thompson moved to her position with quick efficiency. Mom, we need communication with base command. The attackers cut primary systems, but there must be backup channels. Emergency radio in the security office, but that's 3 corridors away through hostile territory. Can we reach it from here using maintenance access? Thompson considered. Maybe. There's a service tunnel system, but I don't know the layout. Ido. Arya had memorized the hospital blueprints during her quiet preparations in Act 2. I can navigate it. I need 2 people who can move quietly and follow orders without question. I'll go. Tyler volunteered immediately. Your leg's barely functional, Arya countered. I can move, and you need someone who won't panic. Tyler's expression was determined. You taught me to push through pain, remember? Arya studied him, then nodded. All right, one more. Someone small and quiet. Emily stepped forward. I know where the security office is. I've delivered medications there dozens of times. Emily, you're not combat trained. Neither are most of the people here, but we're all fighting anyway. Emily's voice was steady despite the bruise darkening on her face. You need me. Arya looked at the young nurse, seeing the same determination she'd once possessed herself. Sometimes courage mattered more than training. Okay, but you follow my instructions exactly. No improvisación, no heroics. Understood. Understood. Arya turned to Thompson. You're in command while I'm gone. Hold this position. Don't let them push you back into the patient rooms. Those people are counting on you. What if they overrun us? They won't. You're Marines. Make me proud. Thompson nodded sharply. Yes, ma'am. Arya moved to the triage area where Dr. Chun was treating a Marine with a shoulder wound. Doctor, I need supplies. Enough for basic trauma care, portable. Planning for casualties? Planning for everything. Arya's eyes held grim acceptance. If we can't reach that radio, this gets much worse. Dr. Chun assembled a compact medical kit without further questions. As he handed it to her, he paused. Arya, that first day you arrived, I knew you were different. But I never imagined this. Most people don't expect their nurses to be former special operators. Will you stay in nursing? After this, Arya checked her weapon, her expression distant. If we survive, ask me again. Right now, I'm just trying to keep everyone alive. She gathered Tyler and Emily near the service access panel. The entrance was concealed behind medical equipment, designed for maintenance access to electrical and ventilation systems. The tunnel runs parallel to the main corridors, Arya explained quietly. We move in single file. I'm on point, Tyler in middle, Emily at rear. No lights unless absolutely necessary. Hand signals for communication. If we encounter hostiles, you both flatten against the wall and let me handle it. Clear. Both nodded. Arya Pride opened the access panel. Darkness yawned beyond, broken only by occasional dim emergency lights. The tunnel was narrow, maybe 4 feet high, requiring them to crouch and move carefully. Stay close. Watch your step. Arya slipped into the tunnel, weapon ready. The space was cramped and oppressive, filled with the mechanical hum of ventilation systems. They moved slowly, Arya's senses hyper-alert for any sign of danger. Behind her, Tyler's breathing was labored from pain, but he kept pace. Emily remained silent and focused. They'd covered maybe 50 meters when Arya held up a closed fist, the universal signal to stop. Voices echoed from somewhere ahead, muffled by walls, but definitely present. She edged forward to where the tunnel passed, near a ventilation grate. Through the grate, she could see 2 attackers in the corridor below, speaking in low tones. How much longer until extraction? One asked. Helicopters inbound. 20 minutes. We secure the package and disappear. What about witnesses? Once we have the officer, the whole place gets sanitized. No survivors, no evidence. The words confirmed Aria's worst fears. This wasn't just about capturing Captain Richards. The attackers planned to eliminate everyone in the hospital. She pulled back from a grate and signaled Tyler and Emily to continue moving. They had to reach that radio. Reinforcements were their only chance of preventing a massacre. The tunnel branched ahead. Aria consulted her mental map and chose the left path, leading them deeper into the hospital's infrastructure. The cramped space and darkness pressed in from all sides, but she maintained steady progress. A sudden sound made her freeze. Footsteps above them, heavy boots on metal grating. Someone was in a maintenance access above their tunnel. Aria signaled for absolute silence. The footsteps passed overhead, pausing once directly above Emily's position. Aria's hand tightened on her weapon, ready to engage if they were discovered. Long seconds stretched like hours. Then the footsteps continued, fading into distance. Aria released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding and motioned them forward. They emerged from the tunnel into a storage area adjacent to the security office. Aria checked the space carefully before allowing Tyler and Emily to exit. "Wait here," she whispered. "I'll clear the office." She moved to the security office door, listening for any sound within. Nothing. She tested the handle. Locked, but not reinforced. A solid kick near the handle would breach it, but the noise might attract attention. Aria examined the lock more carefully. Standard electronic mechanism with backup mechanical override. She pulled a small toolkit from her medical bag, the kind nurses carried for minor equipment repairs, but selected the smallest implements. 30 seconds later, the lock clicked open. The security office was empty, equipment still powered by backup batteries. Aria moved to the emergency radio system and powered it up. Static filled the air as she adjusted frequencies, searching for the command channel. Baseplate actual, this is Nightingale. Do you copy? She used the hospital's designated call sign, her voice low and controlled. Static. She adjusted frequency and tried again. Baseplate actual, Nightingale. Emergency situation. Multiple hostile forces inside facility. Request immediate tactical response. How copy? More static, then a broken voice crackled through. Nightingale. Baseplate. Heavy interference. Say again your traffic. Baseplate. Nightingale. Hospital under armed assault. Approximate 15 to 20 hostiles. Casualties among staff and patients. We need immediate QRF deployment. Acknowledge. The response was clearer this time. Nightingale. Baseplate copies armed assault. QRF spinning up now. ETA 25 minutes. Can you hold position? 25 minutes. An eternity in combat time. Affirmative. Baseplate. We're holding an ICU. Advise approaching units. Hostile forces may have air assets inbound for extraction. Recommand aérien l'interdiction. Copy all. Nightingale. Identify yourself for verification. Aria hesitated only a moment. Baseplate. This is Lieutenant Aria Bennett, formerly DevGru, currently attached Nurse Corps. Authentication code Bravo 79er Charlie Whiskey. A longer pause, then the response came with new urgency. Bennett, baseplate. Authentication confirmed. Command is very interested in your current situation. Hold your position. Help is coming. Roger, baseplate. Nightingale out. She killed the transmission and turned to find Tyler and Emily staring at her. DevGru. Emily whispered. That's the most elite special operations unit in the military. Was, Aria corrected. Past tense. Right now, I'm just trying to keep us alive for 25 more minutes. Tyler shifted his weight, favoring his good leg. They know you're here now. Your old unit. What happens after this? After this, I'll probably spend weeks in debriefings explaining why a former Tier 1 operator didn't report security concerns that led to a facility breach. Aria's expression was grim. But that's a future problem. Present problem is getting back to the ICU before the attackers realize we've called for help. The return journey through the tunnels was faster, driven by urgency. They just emerged back into the ICU when gunfire erupted again. The attackers had launched another assault, this one more aggressive than before. Arya grabbed her weapon and moved to the defensive line. Thompson, status. They're pushing hard, ma'am, trying to flank through the east corridor. Arya assessed the situation instantly. The attackers had adapted, using suppressive fire to pin down defenders while a smaller group attempted to exploit a weak point in their perimeter. Emily, get to triage and prepare for casualties. Tyler, distribute remaining ammunition. I want every weapon fully loaded. She moved to Thompson's position. Sergeant, pull second squad back 15 feet. Let them think they're gaining ground, then hit them from the recessed doorway. Thompson grinned fiercely. Ambush position. I like it. The tactical adjustment worked perfectly. As attackers advanced into what they thought was won ground, Marines opened fire from unexpected angles. The assault stalled, then broke as attackers retreated to reassess. Cease fire. Conserve ammunition. Arya commanded. In the brief silence that followed, she addressed the defenders. Reinforcements are coming. 20 minutes out. We just need to hold until then. A cheer rose from the Marines, exhausted but newly energized by hope. The knowledge that help was coming transformed the defenders' mindset from desperate survival to determined resistance. Arya used the lull to reorganize their positions, creating stronger defensive depth and better interlocking fields of fire. Dr. Chun approached her during the repositioning. Lieutenant, we're running low on medical supplies. If the fighting intensifies, I won't be able to treat everyone properly. Prioritize critical injuries over minor ones. Keep people combat effective, if possible. Arya's tone was matter of fact. I know it goes against medical ethics, but right now we need fighters more than perfectly treated patients. Dr. Chun nodded reluctantly, understanding the brutal mathematics of their situation. Then the attacker's voice boomed through a portable loudspeaker system they brought. Attention hospital personnel. You have one chance to surrender. Give us Captain Richards, and we'll allow everyone else to leave safely. Refuse, and we'll kill every person in that room. The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Arya could feel the fear rippling through the civilians, the uncertainty even among some Marines. You believe them? Thompson asked quietly. No, they can't leave witnesses. That announcement is psychological warfare, trying to turn us against each other. As if proving her point, the voice continued. We know you have limited ammunition. We know you're wounded and outnumbered. Be smart. Save yourselves. A young medic near the back spoke up, his voice shaking. Maybe we should consider it. If it saves lives, it won't. Arya cut him off firmly, but not unkindly. They're lying. The moment we give them Captain Richards, they'll kill everyone here to eliminate witnesses. Our only chance is to hold until reinforcements arrive. How do you know they're lying? The medic challenged. Arya met his eyes. Because I've run operations like this. When you can't accomplish your mission cleanly, you try to manipulate targets into making mistakes. That's what they're doing. Don't fall for it. Patterson backed her up. She's right. I've seen this before too. We hold, we fight, we survive together. The loudspeaker crackled again. You have 2 minutes to decide. After that, we stop asking nicely. Arya turned to the defenders. Everyone listen carefully. What happens next is going to get harder. They'll try psychological tactics. They'll try to exploit our fear. They might even try to use hostages against us. But we hold this line. We protect each other. And we trust that help is coming. She paused, letting her words sink in. I know most of you didn't sign up for combat today. You're doctors, nurses, support staff. But right now, you're defenders of wounded soldiers who can't protect themselves. That makes you warriors, whether you wear uniforms or scrubs. The speech had its intended effect. Faces that had shown fear moments before now showed determination. Thompson stepped beside her, his voice low. Ma'am, I need to ask something. That tactical thinking, those speeches, that's command-level training. What exactly did you do in DevGru? Arya checked her weapon, not meeting his eyes. I led assault teams on direct action missions. Hostage rescue, high-value target raids, counterterrorism operations. Things I'm not allowed to talk about in detail. So you've been in situations like this before. Worse than this. But that doesn't make this easy. She finally looked at him. Every time is different. Every time, people can die if I make the wrong call. You haven't made a wrong call yet. The day's not over. The 2-minute deadline passed. The expected assault didn't come. Instead, something worse happened. An explosion rocked a different section of the hospital, nowhere near the ICU. The blast was controlled, deliberate. Then another explosion, closer this time. They're demolishing sections systematically, Arya realized with cold horror. Creating chaos, splitting our attention. A Marine burst into the ICU from an adjoining corridor. Lieutenant, they've taken hostages. Medical staff in the West Wing. At least 6 people, maybe more. The moral calculus shifted instantly. Arya had to choose between holding their defensive position and attempting a rescue that would split their already thin forces. Thompson saw her calculating. Your call, ma'am. Arya's mind raced through options. Splitting forces was tactically unsound, but abandoning hostages went against everything she believed in. How many hostiles guarding the hostages? Unclear. At least 3, maybe 4. Not overwhelming numbers, but enough to require a coordinated assault. We can't abandon our people, Emily said quietly. We can't. Arya made her decision. Thompson, you hold this position with 8 Marines. Dr. Chun coordinates medical support. I'll take 4 people and attempt hostage rescue through the service tunnels. That's suicide, ma'am. It's calculated risk. Different thing. Arya selected her team quickly. Tyler, you're with me despite that leg. I need your shooting. Patterson, you know the hospital layout. Marcus and Williams, you're both mobile and trained. The 4 Marines she'd selected moved to her position immediately. We go through maintenance access, come up behind their position. Fast, quiet, précise. Hostages are priority. We get them out. We don't engage unless absolutely necessary. She looked each team member in the eye. This is a scalpel operation, not a hammer. Understood. Understood. They replied in unison. Thompson gripped her shoulder. Don't get killed doing something heroic, ma'am. We need you back here. I don't do heroic. I do effective. Arya checked her weapon one final time. Hold this position, Sergeant. No matter what you hear, no matter what happens, you hold. Yes, ma'am. The rescue team slipped into the service tunnels, moving with purpose through the cramped darkness. Arya led them with absolute confidence, her mental map of the hospital guiding every turn. They reached a position overlooking the West Wing through ventilation grates. Below, Arya could see 6 medical staff members huddled together, hands bound. 4 attackers guarded them, weapons ready but postures relaxed. They clearly didn't expect resistance. Arya studied the tactical situation. The hostages were clustered in the center of the room. Attackers positioned at corners. Limited cover. Any gunfight would likely result in hostage casualties. She needed a different approach. Patterson, Tyler, you two provide overwatch from this position. On my signal, create a distraction at the far end of the corridor. Nothing deadly, just noise and movement to draw their attention. What kind of distraction? Improvise. You're creative. Arya turned to the 2 Marines. Williams, Marcus, you're with me. We dropped through the ceiling access panel behind their position. Close quarters takedown, simultaneous on my mark. No gunfire unless absolutely necessary. The plan was risky, dependent on split-second timing and perfect execution. Exactly the kind of operation Arya had run dozens of times before. They positioned themselves carefully. Arya counted down silently, watching the attackers' patterns of movement, waiting for the exact right moment when their attention would be divided. Then Patterson and Tyler created their distraction. The sound of metal crashing echoed from the far corridor. All 4 attackers turned toward the noise. Now Arya breathed. She dropped through the ceiling panel in complete silence, landing behind the nearest attacker. Her arm wrapped around his throat before he could react, cutting off air and blood flow to his brain. He went limp in seconds. Marcus and Williams dropped simultaneously, each targeting an attacker with practiced precision. The 3rd guard went down without a sound, but the 4th attacker reacted faster than expected. He spun toward the hostages, weapon rising. Arya was already moving. She crossed the distance in 2 explosive strides, her hand striking his weapon arm with devastating force. The rifle clattered away as she drove him into the wall, her forearm across his throat pinning him in place. "Don't," she said quietly, her voice cold as winter. "Give me a reason." The attacker looked into her eyes and saw something that made him stop struggling. Complete, professional willingness to end him without hesitation or regret. Smart choice. Arya rendered him unconscious with a precise strike and turned to the hostages. One of them, a young doctor named Harrison, stared at her in shock. "Lieutenant Bennett? What? How did you?" Explanations later. "Can you all walk?" They nodded, still processing what they'd just witnessed. "Tyler, Patterson, clear a path back to the ICU. Marcus, Williams, escort the hostages. I'll provide rear security." The rescue took less than 4 minutes from start to finish. By the time the attackers realized their hostages were gone, Arya's team was already halfway back to the defensive position. They emerged into the ICU to find the defenders still holding strong. The hostages were immediately taken to triage, where Dr. Chun and Emily began treating them for minor injuries and shock. Thompson approached Arya with barely contained admiration. 6 hostages, 0 casualties, minimal contact. That was textbook special operations. That was necessity. But Arya allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction. They'd struck back, taken the initiative, proven they weren't helpless victims. Then her radio crackled, the same voice that had threatened them earlier, but now carrying an edge of frustration. "Very clever, Lieutenant Bennett, but you've only delayed the inevitable." Arya's blood went cold. They knew her name. That meant they'd done their homework, knew who she was before the attack began. "You have something we want," the voice continued. "But now I think we'll take something you want too. Tell me, Lieutenant, how many of your people can you afford to lose before you break?" Another explosion rocked the hospital, this one much closer. Smoke began filtering into the ICU through ventilation systems. The attackers weren't trying to wait them out anymore. They were escalating, turning this into a battle of attrition they believed they could win. Arya checked her watch. 15 minutes until reinforcements arrived. 15 minutes to hold against an enemy that knew exactly who she was and was targeting her specifically. The game had changed, and the next move would determine whether anyone in the hospital survived to see rescue arrive. Thompson moved beside her, weapon ready. "Orders, ma'am." Arya's mind shifted into high gear, calculating options and probabilities with the speed of long experience. "Prepare for final assault," she said quietly. "They're going to throw everything at us in the next few minutes. This is where we find out what we're really made of." The defenders took their positions, wounded and exhausted, but grimly determined. Outside their perimeter, attackers prepared for one last push. The countdown had begun. The smoke thickened in the ICU, forcing defenders to breathe through cloth torn from medical supplies. Arya positioned herself near the main barricade, her eyes watering but focused on the corridor beyond. 12 minutes until reinforcements arrived. 12 minutes that felt like a lifetime. Thompson coughed beside her, covering his mouth. "Ma'am, we can't hold if we can't breathe. We need to clear this smoke or fall back. Falling back puts us in smaller rooms with no defensive depth," Arya calculated quickly. "We hold here. Get wet towels from the triage area. Cover faces, stay low." As Thompson moved to relay orders, a figure emerged from the smoke in the corridor. Not attacking, just standing there. Arya recognized him instantly, even through the haze. Captain Morrison, the logistics officer who'd handled the suspicious supply delivery weeks ago. He raised his hand slowly, showing he was unarmed. "Lieutenant Bennett, I need to talk to you." "Step into the open slowly," Arya commanded, weapon trained on him. "Any sudden movements, and you're done." Morrison complied, moving with careful deliberation. As he entered the ICU perimeter, 2 Marines grabbed him, searching for weapons. They found none. Arya approached him, her expression cold. "You helped them. The supply discrepancies, the security camera adjustments. That was you." Morrison's face was pale with fear and shame. "Not willingly. You have to believe me." "I don't have to believe anything." "Start talking." The logistics officer's words came in a rush. 3 months ago, someone contacted me. They had information about my brother. He'd been captured by insurgents 2 years back, declared dead. But they had proof he was alive, being held in a camp across the border. Dr. Chun had moved closer, listening intently. They used your brother as leverage. They said if I provided basic information about hospital operations, they'd arrange his release. Just schedules, supply deliveries, routine security protocols. Nothing that would get anyone killed. Morrison's voice broke. I thought I was saving my brother's life. Instead, you enabled an attack that's killed how many people? Aria's tone was harsh but controlled. I didn't know. I swear, I thought it was intelligence gathering, maybe planning a kidnapping at worst. When the attack started, I realized what I'd done. Morrison looked at her with desperate eyes. That's why I'm here, to help stop this. Thompson stepped forward. Why should we believe you? This could be a trick to get inside our perimeter. Because I can tell you what they're really after. Morrison pulled a folded paper from his pocket. This is the real target, not just Captain Richards. Arya took the paper, unfolding it carefully. It was a classified document, a list of intelligence officers operating in the region. Captain Richards' name was highlighted, but so were 3 others currently in the hospital. They're not extracting one officer, Arya realized. They want to eliminate an entire intelligence network. Richards was wounded in the convoy, but the others are here receiving treatment for other injuries. The attackers know exactly where they all are. And once they eliminate them, they disappear before reinforcements arrive. Morrison finished. That's their actual timeline. They don't care about holding the hospital. They just need to complete their mission and extract. Arya's mind raced through the implications. Where are the other 3 officers? 2 are in the West Wing, 1 in the surgical recovery area. The West Wing, where they'd just rescued hostages. The attackers must have already eliminated those 2 officers during the chaos. That left 1 officer in surgical recovery and Captain Richards here in the ICU. How many attackers total? Arya demanded. 14 when they started. I don't know how many you've taken down. Arya calculated quickly. They'd neutralized at least 5 during the fighting. That left approximately 9 hostiles still active, assuming Morrison's count was accurate. What about the insider? Thompson asked. Are you the only one helping them? Morrison shook his head. There's someone else. I don't know who. They communicated through encrypted messages. But someone else provided real-time security information during the attack. A traitor still among them. Arya filed that information away for later. Right now, she had more immediate problems. Sergeant, secure Morrison in the back room. Post a guard. Arya turned to Dr. Chun. Where's this surgical recovery officer? Lieutenant Shaw, 3rd floor. Recovering from emergency appendectomy 2 days ago. We need to get him down here where we can protect him. That's 3 floors up through hostile territory, Thompson objected. We can't spare people for that mission. Arya checked her watch. 10 minutes until QRF arrival. Not enough time for a rescue operation and return before the final assault. Unless she went alone. I can move faster solo, she said, thinking aloud. Light and quiet. No team to coordinate. Get Shaw. Bring him back before reinforcement arrive. That's suicide, Patterson protested. You'll be completely exposed. I've operated alone in worse situations. Arya checked her remaining ammunition. 1 magazine plus 6 loose rounds. Not ideal, but workable. Thompson, you're in command until I return. Hold this position no matter what. Tyler limped forward, his face grim. Lieutenant, you've already risked enough. Let someone else go. There is no one else with the training for this. Arya said simply. You all hold here. Protect Captain Richards and the civilians. That's an order. She moved toward the service tunnel access before anyone could argue further. Emily caught her arm as she passed. Come back, the young nurse said quietly. We need you. I will. Arya tried to sound confident. Just keep everyone safe until I do. The journey through the tunnels was faster alone. Arya moved with practiced silence, her senses hyper-alert for any sign of enemy presence. She navigated by memory and instinct, reaching the 3rd floor in minutes. Surgical recovery was eerily quiet. Emergency lighting cast everything in red shadows. Arya moved through the ward cautiously, checking each room. Most were empty, patients evacuated during the initial chaos. She found Lieutenant Shaw in the last room, conscious but weak from surgery. He looked up as she entered, confusion crossing his face. "Who are you?" "Lieutenant Bennett. I'm here to extract you to a secure position. I can barely walk. Then I'll carry you. Can you hold a weapon?" Shaw nodded slowly. Arya handed him her sidearm, keeping the rifle for herself. She helped him to his feet, supporting most of his weight. They'd just reached the corridor when Arya heard footsteps approaching. Multiple people, moving with tactical spacing. She pulled Shaw into a room and killed the lights. Through the doorway, she watched 4 attackers move past, searching methodically. They were hunting Shaw, just as Morrison had warned. If she'd waited even 5 more minutes, they would have found him. The attackers moved on, clearing rooms in sequence. Arya waited until their voices faded, then helped Shaw toward the service tunnel entrance. Every step was agonizingly slow, with Shaw barely able to support himself. They reached the tunnel access just as shouts echoed behind them. The attackers had discovered Shaw's empty room. "Go, go," Arya urged, helping Shaw into the tunnel. She followed, pulling the access panel closed behind them. Immediately, she heard the attackers burst into the corridor outside. They went through the maintenance access, circle around, cut them off. Arya's mind mapped alternate routes instantly. The direct path back to the ICU would be blocked within minutes. She needed a different approach. "Can you climb?" she asked Shaw quietly. "Not well. Then I'll help you. We're going up, not down. They'll expect us to retreat to the ICU. We surprised them." She guided Shaw through a vertical access shaft, practically carrying him up the ladder. Her shoulders burned with effort, but adrenaline and training pushed her through. They emerged on the hospital roof, bursting through a maintenance hatch. The desert air was cool after the smoky interior. Arya pulled out her radio. "Baseplate, Nightingale. I'm on the hospital roof with friendly personnel. Be advised, approximately 9 hostiles still active inside facility. Nightingale, baseplate. QRF is 2 minutes out. Hold position on roof for extraction." 2 minutes. They'd made it. Then Arya heard the helicopter. Not the heavy military birds of the QRF, but something lighter and faster. The attackers' extraction craft, arriving right on schedule. The helicopter appeared over the horizon, heading straight for the hospital roof. For a moment, Arya thought they were the target. Then the birds settled on the opposite corner of the roof, and she understood. The attackers were extracting from the roof, which meant they'd be coming up the same access shaft she'd just used. "Shaw, can you shoot?" She had to yell over the helicopter noise. "Better than I can run." Arya positioned him behind an air conditioning unit with good sight lines to the access hatch. "Anyone comes through that hatch who isn't me, you fire. Understand? Where are you going?" "To make sure they don't get away." She moved across the roof using equipment for cover, approaching the helicopter from an angle that kept her outside the pilot sight line. The aircraft was a civilian model, modified for quick insertions and extractions. No weapon systems, just speed and maneuverability. Arya reached the landing gear just as the first attackers emerged onto the roof. They were carrying someone between them. Captain Richards, unconscious or dead. They'd broken through the ICU defenses and secured their primary target. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. While she'd been rescuing Shaw, the attackers had achieved their main objective. Thompson's voice crackled over her radio. "Lieutenant, they breached us. Took Richards. Multiple casualties. We need immediate support." "I see them, Sergeant. Hold position. Reinforcements are landing in 1 minute." Arya watched the attackers carry Richards toward the helicopter. She could take shots from here, possibly stop them. But Shaw was exposed behind her, and opening fire would draw attention to his position. Then one of the attackers turned, and Arya's blood froze. She recognized him, not from this deployment, but from 3 years ago. A mission in Syria that had gone catastrophically wrong, where her team had walked into an ambush that killed 2 operators. The face of the man who'd planned that ambush was now 20 feet away, coordinating the extraction of Captain Richards. He looked at her direction and stopped. Their eyes met across the roof. Recognition flashed in his expression, followed by something like satisfaction. "Hello, Lieutenant Bennett," he called over the helicopter noise. "I wondered if you'd remember me." "Hassan Zain," Arya replied, her voice hard. "I remember. My teammates' blood remembers. They died doing their jobs. As you might tonight." He gestured to his men. "Get Richards aboard. I'll handle our old friend." The other attackers moved to the helicopter while Zain advanced on Arya's position. He was armed with a rifle, while she had limited ammunition and a wounded officer to protect. "You could have stayed hidden," Zain said. "Played the quiet nurse, survived the night. Why reveal yourself?" "Because people needed protecting." "Noble. Foolish, but noble." He raised his weapon. "You can't stop this. Richards will give us what we need, one way or another. And you'll die knowing you failed again." The word struck at Arya's deepest wound. The mission 3 years ago where she'd lost teammates, where her decisions had led to deaths she could never take back. The guilt that had driven her out of special operations. But she wasn't that person anymore. She'd spent 18 months learning to heal instead of hurt, to save instead of kill. The guilt remained, but it no longer controlled her. "I didn't fail," Arya said quietly. "I'm still here. They're gone. That's not failure. That's survival." She fired. Not at Zain, but at the helicopter's tail rotor. The shots were precise, damaging the rotor assembly. The aircraft shuddered, alarms blaring. The pilot's voice came over external speakers. "We've got damage. Can't maintain flight." Zane's face twisted with rage. He opened fire, but Arya had already moved. She rolled behind cover as bullets tracked her path, then returned fire with controlled precision. Behind Zane, Shah was firing from his position, adding suppression that forced the attackers near the helicopter to take cover. Then the night erupted with the sound of heavy military helicopters. The QRF had arrived. Fast ropes deployed, and special operators hit the roof in seconds. The firefight ended in less than 30 seconds. QRF operators moved with overwhelming precision, neutralizing the remaining attackers with professional efficiency. Zane attempted to flee across the roof, but was tackled by 2 operators before he made it 10 feet. Arya lowered her weapon, exhausted beyond measure. A medic rushed to Shah, stabilizing him and calling for immediate evacuation. Another operator approached Arya, his rank insignia marking him as a senior team leader. "Lieutenant Bennett?" "Commander Hayes, SEAL Team 3. Are you injured?" "Negative. Tired, but functional." Hayes looked at her with professional respect. "Command briefed us on your background. Hell of a thing, holding off this many hostiles with a nursing staff and wounded Marines." "It wasn't just me. Everyone down there fought." "Noted. Medics are securing the facility now. We've got casualties to process." Hayes paused. "Your old commander is en route. They'll want to debrief you personally." "Marcus." Of course he would come. The next hour was a blur of activity. Medical teams flooded the hospital, treating wounded and evacuating critical patients. Military police secured prisoners, including Morrison and Zane. Arya moved through it all mechanically, checking on her people, ensuring everyone received care. She found Thompson in triage, having his shoulder bandaged. "Sergeant, report." Thompson looked up, managed a tired smile. "We held, ma'am. Lost some good people, but we held." "How many?" 3 dead, including 1 nurse. 7 critical injuries. Could have been much worse without your leadership. 3 dead. The number hit Arya hard, but she pushed the emotion down. Time for grief later. The Marines did the real work. You all fought like it was your last stand. It almost was. Thompson stood carefully. "Ma'am, what happens now?" "To you, I mean. They'll want you back, won't they?" "Devgru. I don't know. Right now I'm just focused on helping survivors." She found Tyler in recovery, his leg freshly bandaged after being re-injured during the fighting. Emily sat beside him, both exhausted but alive. "Lieutenant," Tyler said as she approached. "Did we really win?" "We survived. That's winning enough." Arya sat heavily in a nearby chair. "You both did incredible work. Emily, your coordination kept triage running through everything. Tyler, your shooting saved lives." "I just followed your lead," Emily said quietly. We all did. Dr. Chin appeared, looking decades older than he had that morning. Arya, final count is in. Between staff and patients, we protected 83 people. 13 didn't make it. Many more would have died without your actions. 13 deaths. The number would haunt her. But 83 saved mattered too. Sandra Whitmore found her later, sitting alone in a quiet corridor. The senior nurse sat beside her without speaking for a long moment. I owe you more than an apology, Sandra finally said. I almost got people killed with my suspicions and politics. While you were protecting everyone. You didn't know. I should have trusted you. Instead, I wasted energy doubting when I should have been learning. Sandra paused. For what it's worth, you're the best nurse I've ever worked with, even without the special operations background. Thank you. Arya meant it. You held together under impossible pressure. That matters more than any history. Patterson approached with Dr. Harrison, the doctor they'd rescued from the hostage situation. Lieutenant, the hospital commander wants to see you. So does your former commanding officer. They're both waiting in the conference room. Arya stood, squaring her shoulders. This was the reckoning she'd expected. The conference room held 3 people. The hospital commander, Colonel Davidson, a stern-faced officer in his 50s. Marcus Webb, her former team leader, looking exactly as she remembered. And a woman in civilian clothes she didn't recognize. Lieutenant Bennett, Colonel Davidson began. Sit down, please. Arya sat, maintaining military bearing despite her exhaustion. Marcus spoke first. Arya, you look terrible. Feel worse, sir. You bet. His expression softened. I got the preliminary reports. What you did today was extraordinary. Probably saved 100 lives. With respect, sir, I didn't do it alone. The civilian woman spoke. I'm Jennifer Walsh, Defense Intelligence. We need to discuss Captain Richards and the intelligence breach. Richards was extracted? Arya asked, dreading the answer. The QRF recovered him from the disabled helicopter. He's injured but alive and secure. Walsh consulted a tablet. The attackers were after 4 intelligence officers. They eliminated 2 before you organized defenses. You saved Richards and Lieutenant Shaw. That's 50% mission failure on their end. 13 people still died. Many more would have died without your intervention, Colonel Davidson said firmly. You prevented a massacre, Lieutenant. With respect, sir, I also failed to prevent the breach. I noticed security anomalies weeks ago, but didn't push hard enough. The attack might have been prevented. Marcus leaned forward. Arya, you were a nurse on routine deployment. You reported concerns through proper channels. Nobody expected you to prevent a coordinated military assault. But I could have done more. I had the training, the experience. And you used them when it mattered most? Walsh interrupted. Captain Morrison's debriefing revealed the conspiracy was extensive, with multiple insider contacts we're still identifying. You couldn't have prevented this alone. The word should have been comforting, but guilt still gnawed at Arya. 3 years ago, she'd lost teammates to her decisions. Today, she'd lost people under her protection. The parallel was too close. Marcus seemed to read her thoughts. This isn't Syria, Arya. You didn't walk into an ambush. You defended against an attack nobody saw coming. There's a difference. Doesn't feel different. It is. Marcus's voice was firm but kind. In Syria, you made tactical decisions based on incomplete intelligence. Today, you saved lives with brilliant leadership. Stop punishing yourself for not being perfect. Colonel Davidson cleared his throat. Lieutenant, your actions today will be formally recognized. You'll receive commendations. But we need to discuss your future assignment. Here it came. The demand to return to special operations, to leave nursing behind. We understand you left DevGru for personal reasons, Davidson continued. Those reasons remain valid. But you've demonstrated exceptional capability in crisis leadership. The Navy needs officers like you. Sir, I joined Nurse Corps to help people heal. That hasn't changed. We're not asking you to leave nursing, Walsh said. We're asking you to consider specialized assignments where both skill sets could save lives. Hospitals in conflict zones need protection. Medical teams conducting humanitarian operations in hostile territory need security expertise. You could train others, develop protocols, bridge the gap between combat and care. Arya considered this, not a return to raids and killing, but using her experience to protect healers. It was a middle path she hadn't considered. I'd like time to think about it, sir. Granted. Take the time you need. Davidson stood, signaling the meeting's end. But know this, Lieutenant. Regardless of where you serve next, what you did today exemplified the highest standards of military service. The people of this hospital owe you their lives. After the colonel and Walsh left, Marcus remained. Walk with me. They moved through the hospital corridors, past Marines receiving treatment and staff beginning the long process of recovery. You really left the teams for nursing? Marcus asked quietly. I needed to stop being the person who kills and become the person who heals. After Syria, after losing Jenkins and Matthews, Arya's voice caught. I couldn't carry that weight anymore. But you carried it today, carried it well. That was different. Today I was protecting, not attacking. Defending, not assaulting. Marcus nodded slowly. I understand. I don't think I could make that transition. But I respect that you did. He paused. For what it's worth, the teams would take you back in a heartbeat. You're still one of the best operators I've ever seen. I appreciate that, sir. But that life is behind me. Then make the most of this one. Marcus stopped walking, turned to face her. You proved today that healing and fighting aren't opposites. Sometimes they're the same thing. You fought to heal. You killed to save. That's not weakness, Arya. That's wisdom. The words settled into Arya's chest, easing something that had been tight for 3 years. Over the following days, the hospital slowly returned to something approaching normal. Wounded were stabilized and evacuated. Structural damage was assessed. The investigation into insider assistance identified 3 additional conspirators in the supply chain. Arya visited each person who'd fought alongside her. She attended memorial services for the fallen, standing with the survivors to honor those they'd lost. She gave statements to investigators, reliving every moment of the attack. 1 week after the siege, Arya found herself back in the recovery ward. Tyler was there, doing physical therapy with renewed determination. How's the leg? She asked. Getting stronger. Doctor says I'll make full recovery thanks to your quick treatment during the fight. Tyler paused his exercises. Lieutenant, I wanted to ask something. When you left Special Operations, was it because you were afraid? No, it was because I'd stopped believing killing was the only way to serve. But you killed people during the attack. How do you reconcile that? Arya considered the question carefully. Every person I hurt today was actively trying to kill innocents. I didn't seek that fight, but I didn't run from it either. There's a difference between hunting enemies and defending the helpless. Tyler nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense. It's like you chose healing, but kept the skills to protect healers. Something like that. Emily joined them, carrying medical charts. Lieutenant, Captain Morrison's brother, was confirmed alive. Intelligence located him in a border camp. They're negotiating his release. Good. Morrison made terrible choices, but his motivation was human. Maybe he gets a chance at redemption. The young nurse studied Arya carefully. Will you stay here? In nursing? Yes, but maybe with different assignments. Places where nurses need protection, where medical missions operate in dangerous areas. Somewhere I can use all my skills to help people. That sounds perfect for you. Patterson appeared in the doorway. Lieutenant, there's someone here to see you. Says it's important. Arya followed him to the visitor area, where Marine Colonel waited. The officer stood as she approached. Lieutenant Bennett, I'm Colonel Martinez, Task Force Medical Operations. I'm here to offer you a unique assignment. He handed her a folder. We're establishing rapid response medical teams for combat zones. Teams that can treat casualties while defending against attack. We need someone to develop training protocols, someone who understands both medicine and combat. Arya opened the folder, scanning the details. It was everything Walsh had suggested. A way to use both halves of herself, to heal and protect simultaneously. I'd be training others, not conducting operations directly. Correct. Developing curriculum, running exercises, advising on security protocols. You'd be based stateside with occasional deployments to observe and adjust programs. Can I have time to consider? Take 2 weeks. This is a big decision. After he left, Arya sat alone with the folder. She thought about Syria, about the teammates she'd lost. She thought about today, about the people she'd saved. She thought about who she'd been and who she wanted to be. The sun was setting over the desert when Thompson found her on the hospital roof. The same roof where the final confrontation had occurred. "Thought I'd find you here," he said, sitting beside her. "This is where you decided to stay in the fight, isn't it? This is where I realized healing and fighting could be the same thing. You gonna take that training assignment?" "I think so. It feels right. Using everything I learned to help others do what we did here." Thompson was quiet for a moment. "The Marines you led during the siege, were putting you up for a medal. Probably won't be public because of operational security, but the recognition will be official. I don't need medals. Maybe not, but we need you to accept it. Because it's not just for you. It's for everyone who fought. You led us, so the medal represents all of us." Arya understood. Accepting recognition meant honoring everyone's sacrifice, not just her own. "Then I'll accept. For all of us." They sat together watching the sun disappear below the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and red. Around them, the hospital continued its work of healing. Staff moved through corridors, treating patients, rebuilding what had been damaged. Arya touched the seal, trident tattoo on her forearm, hidden beneath her sleeve. Once it had represented her entire identity. Now it was just part of who she was. Warrior and healer, fighter and nurse, protector and caregiver. She'd spent 3 years trying to become one thing or the other. The attack had taught her she could be both. 2 weeks later, Arya stood in Colonel Martinez's office, signing papers that would transfer her to the Medical Operations Task Force. Her new assignment would begin in a month, giving her time to finish her rotation and properly transition. As she left the office, she passed a bulletin board with photos from various military operations. One showed a group of Navy SEALs in full combat gear. She didn't recognize most of them, but their stance and bearing were familiar. Brothers and sisters in arms, doing impossible things in terrible places. She'd been one of them once. In some ways, she always would be. But now she was something more. Not just a warrior who'd learned to heal, but a healer who knew how to fight. Not hiding from her past or running from her skills, but integrating everything into a life dedicated to protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Arya Bennett had arrived at the hospital as a nurse nobody took seriously. She left as someone who'd proven that the strongest warriors sometimes wear scrubs instead of camouflage, and that the most effective weapons are sometimes compassion and courage rather than guns and tactics. The hospital returned to routine operations. New nurses arrived. Patients healed and departed. Life continued. But those who'd been there during the siege would never forget the quiet nurse who became their shield, the woman who taught them that heroism doesn't always announce itself, and that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone underestimated. Lieutenant Arya Bennett, Navy Nurse Corps. Former Naval Special Warfare Operator. Protector of the wounded. Defender of the helpless. Exactly where she belonged. When you see someone quietly going about their work, never seeking attention or recognition, do you wonder what battles they've already fought that taught them such strength? If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more inspiring tales of courage hidden in plain sight.